Welcome to Relation Tales. Please like this video and subscribe Relation Tales. We're grateful for each and every one of you. Let us know where in the world you're tuning in from. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Let's begin. Jake Donovan used to believe that marriages didn't fall apart in one moment. They crumbled piece by piece in the smallest ways. A forgotten text, a sigh at dinner, a look that lingered too long at someone else. He learned that love doesn't vanish overnight. It fades quietly, until one day you wake up next to a stranger wearing the same wedding ring. He met Claire in college. Back then, she was sunshine, barefoot on campus lawns, sketchbook in hand, always humming some tune under her breath. She'd call him Steady Jake, because he never overreacted, never yelled, never broke a promise. They built a life out of those small certainties. A modest house in Denver, weekend hikes, quiet movie nights. Jake worked as an architect. Claire ran her design studio from home, and together they were the couple everyone thought had it all. But love, Jake learned, can rot quietly beneath perfect walls. It began with her phone face down on the counter, then a shift in her laughter, softer when she texted, sharper when she spoke to him. He told himself it was stress, that she was just tired, that the distance wasn't real. Until one night, she came home smelling like a cologne that wasn't his. She noticed the look in his eyes and laughed it off. "Don't be paranoid, Jake," she said, pressing a half-hearted kiss on his cheek. "You always overthink everything." That's when he realized he wasn't overthinking. He'd just been avoiding the truth. Still, he didn't explode. Jake wasn't built for drama. He was built for precision. He started paying attention to the name she dropped casually, to the way her smile twitched when she mentioned Ryan, the so-called old friend who had recently moved back to town. By the time Claire began dressing up more often, Jake already knew where this was heading. He didn't need proof anymore. He needed closure. One Friday evening, she stood by the mirror in their bedroom, brushing her hair with deliberate care. The red dress she wore wasn't new, but it was one she used to save for anniversaries. "I'm heading out," she said, fastening an earring. "Ryan invited me to dinner. He wants to talk about a project." Jake leaned against the doorframe, studying her reflection. His voice calm, measured. "You sure that's all it is?" She turned, irritation flickering across her perfect face. "Why are you so controlling lately?" "It's just dinner with my ex-god. You make everything about trust." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried no warmth. "You're right. Go enjoy your evening." She left, slamming the door behind her, not realizing that something inside him, something patient and deep, had just awakened. That night, Jake sat in silence, the clock ticking beside him. He wasn't thinking about catching her. He was planning something else, something final, something that would make her understand what it felt like to underestimate him. The house felt larger without her. Every sound, the refrigerator hum, the soft ticking of the living room clock, seemed to mock the silence she left behind. Jake sat on the edge of their bed, staring at the reflection of the half-empty closet mirror. He'd always imagined they'd grow old together, gray hair, porch swings, Sunday mornings. Now, all he saw was a man who had given everything and received deceit in return. But Jake wasn't the kind of man who shouted, slammed doors, or made scenes. He had learned early that real strength wasn't in raising your voice. It was in controlling it. So instead of pacing the floor or calling her to ask where she was, he reached for his laptop and opened a folder he'd been building quietly for weeks. Inside were screenshots, texts between Claire and Ryan, restaurant reservations under her name, even a receipt from a boutique she'd used his credit card on for a client meeting. He'd never confronted her. He'd just collected, like an architect preparing blueprints for demolition. He scrolled through them slowly, not with anger, but with clarity. Betrayal, he thought, wasn't just about infidelity. It was about disrespect, about how someone could look you in the eye, knowing full well they were lying, and expect you to keep believing. By the time midnight arrived, Claire still wasn't home. Jake turned off the lights, went to bed, and fell asleep easily for the first time in months. When she tiptoed in after 1 a.m, he didn't move. He listened. The click of her heels, the careful creak of the door, the faint scent of a man's cologne clinging to her jacket. She paused near the bed, whispered a hesitant "Jake," and, hearing no response, sighed in relief. He didn't open his eyes, but he smiled in the dark. Because he knew something she didn't. The next morning, her world would never look the same. The next day began like any other. Jake brewed coffee, made breakfast, and sat at the dining table reading emails. When Claire walked in wearing her robe, she looked tired but smug, the kind of exhaustion that comes from secrets well kept. "Morning," she said, forcing a yawn. "Morning," Jake replied calmly, sliding a cup toward her. She blinked, surprised by his composure. "You're not mad about last night?" "Why would I be?" he said, not looking up. "You said it was just dinner." There was a flicker in her eyes, but she covered it quickly with a smile. "Good. I knew you'd understand." He nodded slightly. "I do now, more than ever." She took her coffee and left the room, humming under her breath. Jake waited until the sound of her footsteps faded down the hall before taking out a sealed envelope he had prepared days ago. Inside was a divorce petition, already signed, along with a neatly written note. "You said it was just dinner." "I agree. It's just a marriage." He placed it by the front door beside her designer luggage, which he had packed neatly that morning. Clothes folded, toiletries organized, even her favorite red heels on top. It was the same kind of precision he applied to his architecture projects, measured, clean, flawless. By noon, she came rushing downstairs, still on a phone call. "Jake, have you seen my—" She froze when she saw the bags. The color drained from her face. What's this?" Jake finally looked up from his laptop. "You said you wanted freedom," he said softly. "I just gave it to you." Her voice trembled. "Jake, don't do this. You're overreacting." He leaned back in his chair, eyes steady. "No, Claire. I'm responding." She tried to laugh it off, but it came out broken. "It was just dinner. You're blowing things out of proportion." Jake closed his laptop slowly, stood, and walked toward her. "You know, for someone who spent months treating me like a fool, you still underestimate me." "I'm not angry. I'm just done." Tears welled in her eyes as she reached out for his arm, but he stepped back. "Jake, please, let's talk about this. I made a mistake. You can't just throw this away." He gave her the faintest smile. "You already did. I'm just cleaning up a mess." The front door opened with a gentle push, and the morning light spilled across the floor, touching everything between them like a final goodbye. "Your car's outside," he said quietly. "And so is Ryan's. I figured you'd prefer to leave together." Her face went pale, her lips trembling as if words might save her, but none came. Jake didn't wait for her to speak. He walked back to the kitchen, poured himself another cup of coffee, and looked out the window as if nothing had happened. Behind him, the sound of her sobs filled the hallway, followed by the quiet thud of the door closing. And just like that, peace returned. But this wasn't the end. Jake knew people like Claire didn't learn lessons through loss. They learned them through reflection, through seeing what they'd thrown away standing tall without them. He wasn't going to yell. He wasn't going to chase revenge in flames. No, his revenge would be colder, smarter, more deliberate, the kind that made her realize too late what she'd lost. Jake didn't look back when the door closed behind her. He didn't need to. The sound alone, the quiet, defeated click, was enough. For the first time in a long while, he felt something that wasn't anger or heartbreak. It was clarity. He spent the next few days in silence, moving through his routines like clockwork. He went to work early, came home late, and filled his evenings with small tasks, organizing old drawings, cleaning the garage, fixing the fence she'd always nagged him about but never helped with. Every nail he hammered felt like a statement. He wasn't broken. Claire, on the other hand, called every night. First angry, then apologetic, then desperate. "Jake, please, can we just talk? You're making this bigger than it is." Her messages read. He never replied. He didn't need to. Her words only confirmed one thing. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done, only sorry she'd been caught. But Jake wasn't finished. He wasn't the kind of man who vanished quietly into heartbreak. No, he believed in lessons, not vengeance. And his lesson was going to sting. He had been the one who built her design studio, literally and figuratively. He'd helped her register it, found clients through his architecture contacts, even invested his savings to buy her workspace downtown. Claire's entire career stood on the foundation of his trust. So when he called their shared accountant and had his name removed from every joint financial document, she didn't see it coming. 2 days later, Claire stormed into his office, eyes red, mascara smudged. She didn't knock. She never did. You froze the business account, she snapped, slamming the door behind her. Jake didn't look up from his blueprints. Correction, he said calmly. I removed my share. You froze it by not reading the fine print. Her voice cracked. You can't do this to me, Jake. I have clients. Projects. He finally raised his eyes to meet hers, and for a second, she hesitated. He wasn't the same man she'd walked all over. There was no trace of pleading in him now, just steady composure. You told me it was just dinner, Claire. So consider this just business. She blinked rapidly, as if the words were a slap. You're really ending everything? After all we've built? He folded the blueprint neatly, aligning the edges with quiet precision. No, he said softly. You ended everything. I'm just drawing the final line. For a moment, she stood there, trembling between anger and regret. Then, as quickly as she came, she turned and left. Jake leaned back in his chair after she was gone, exhaling slowly. He didn't gloat. He didn't feel victorious. What he felt was peace, steady, unwavering peace. Still, he knew her pride wouldn't let her accept defeat quietly. Claire was the kind of person who couldn't stand losing control. She tried to twist the story, to make herself the victim. And sure enough, a week later, mutual friends started calling. Jake, man, Claire's been saying you overreacted. That she was just catching up with an old friend. He let them talk. He didn't defend himself, didn't explain. Because truth, he'd learned, didn't need witnesses. It needed time. But fate, it seemed, wasn't done helping him. A month later, his firm landed a huge contract, a luxury eco-housing development project downtown. The lead designer hired for the interiors? None other than Ryan Matthews, Claire's ex. Jake smirked when he saw the email. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor. At the project's first meeting, Ryan walked in confident, wearing a suit that probably cost more than his rent. And behind him, a few steps late and clearly uncomfortable, came Claire. Her smile faltered the moment she saw Jake sitting at the head of the table. Claire, Jake greeted evenly. Didn't expect to see you here. She swallowed hard, clutching her portfolio. I didn't know you were on this project. Of course you didn't, he said, eyes steady. You never asked. The silence that followed was heavy. Ryan cleared his throat. We should probably start. Jake nodded, flipping open his plans. Absolutely. I like professionalism. Let's keep it that way. Throughout the meeting, he spoke with authority, measured, confident, direct. Claire barely said a word. Every correction he made to her design proposals felt like a subtle reminder. You once underestimated me. Now you answer to me. When the session ended, Ryan approached Jake awkwardly. No hard feelings, right? About the past. Jake extended a firm handshake, smiling faintly. None at all. People make choices. They just have to live with them. Ryan left with a nervous laugh, and Claire stayed behind, her voice trembling. Jake, please, you don't have to humiliate me like this. He turned to her, his expression calm but sharp. Claire, this isn't humiliation. This is what accountability looks like. You wanted freedom. Now you have to stand on your own 2 feet. Her lips parted as if to argue, but no sound came out. She lowered her head and walked away quietly. Jake watched her go, then turned back to his papers. His revenge wasn't loud, wasn't cruel. It was poetic. He hadn't shouted, cheated, or sought sympathy. He'd simply rebuilt his life stronger, steadier, and completely out of her reach. As the office emptied that evening, he stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker. He thought about all the nights he'd waited for her to come home, all the times he'd forgiven lies just to keep peace. Now, peace lived inside him. The betrayal had broken him, but only enough to rebuild himself better. And as for Claire, she'd finally learned what just dinner could cost. Months passed, and winter settled over Denver, blanketing the city in quiet reflection. Jake's life, once consumed by doubt and heartbreak, had found rhythm again. He'd moved into a smaller apartment downtown, modern, minimal, peaceful, the kind of place where he could breathe without memories suffocating him. Every morning, he woke before dawn, brewed black coffee, and walked to work through the crisp air. There was no tension waiting at home, no unanswered texts, no emotional guessing games. He was free, but not bitter. Jake had made a choice, to let go without letting it poison him. Claire, on the other hand, hadn't adjusted to freedom as gracefully. Her design studio struggled without Jake's backing. Clients dropped off, bills stacked up, and even Ryan's so-called partnership began to fracture when their personal drama spilled into work. Jake heard about it through colleagues, but he never indulged in gossip. He didn't need to. The truth had its own gravity. It pulled everything into place eventually. Then one afternoon, fate decided to bring the past to his door one last time. Jake was presenting new blueprints to a development board when his assistant walked in, whispering, "There's someone asking for you in the lobby. Says it's personal." He excused himself politely and stepped out. Claire stood there, her once polished confidence replaced by exhaustion. The bright red lipstick she always wore was gone. Her eyes looked tired, searching. "Jake," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Can we talk?" He studied her for a moment. The same woman who once rolled her eyes at him for being too controlling now looked like someone standing in the wreckage of her own choices. He nodded slowly. 5 minutes. They sat on a lobby bench by the window. Snowflakes drifted outside, the world quiet and still. "I've lost everything," she whispered. "Ryan left. The studio's collapsing. I didn't realize what I had until it was gone." Jake folded his hands, his tone steady. "You didn't lose it, Claire. You gave it away." Her eyes filled with tears. "I know. I was stupid. I thought I needed excitement, something new, but all I found was emptiness. I miss us." For a moment, Jake said nothing. He remembered every sleepless night, every lie he'd swallowed, every time she'd made him question his worth. And then, quietly, he exhaled. "I don't hate you," he said finally, "but I can't go back. We were built on trust, and once it's cracked, nothing fits the same again." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "You've changed." "I had to," he said gently. "Pain has a way of remodeling a person." She tried to smile through the tears. "You sound like an architect, even when you're breaking my heart." He rose, offering a faint, respectful nod. "Goodbye, Claire. I hope you find what you're looking for. Just don't destroy it this time." She reached out as if to touch his hand, but he was already walking away. Not angrily, not bitterly, just finally at peace. Outside, the cold air hit his face as he stepped into the falling snow. For the first time in years, the weight on his chest was gone. He realized revenge hadn't been about payback. It was about reclaiming control of his life. He didn't destroy her. He simply let her witness his peace without her in it. That night, Jake sat by his window, the city glowing below. He thought of all he'd lost and all he'd gained. Strength, clarity, self-respect. He smiled to himself, whispering, it wasn't just a dinner. It was a wake-up call. And somewhere out there, Claire finally understood that too. Because sometimes, the most powerful revenge isn't what you take back. It's what you refuse to take again.